You seem overqualified for this role. Ever had an interviewer hit you with that? It can feel like a trap. Like no matter what you say, you're stuck defending yourself. Say the wrong thing and suddenly they're doubting your commitment. Say nothing and you lose control of the conversation. Now you might be tempted to say, well, you called me in, so clearly that's not the real issue, which might be true, but it doesn't move the conversation forward in a way that benefits you. So instead, in this video, I'm going to show you the exact steps to handle this question with confidence, flip it in your favor, and even have the interviewer selling the role to you by the end. But before we get into that, I need to call something out. Most people get this question completely wrong, and I don't blame them because it feels like a loaded question. See, when I was a recruiter, I saw so many candidates fumble this answer, not because they weren't qualified, but because they didn't understand what the interviewer was really asking. So before I show you the right way to handle this, let's talk about what not to do, because trust me, these mistakes can instantly take you out of the running. Now here's the thing, when an interviewer asks, aren't you overqualified? It's rarely just about your skills and experience. What they're actually thinking is, are you really committed to this role? Are you going to be difficult to manage? Or can they afford you within the budget set out for this role? And most importantly, are you likely to jump ship at the first sign of a better paying opportunity? Yes, they want to know you aren't using them as a stopgap. Now, sometimes this question isn't even about your qualifications, it's a test. They're pushing you just a little to see how you handle low-level criticism. They do this knowing that if you get uptight and defensive about this, there's a good sign you may get uptight and frustrated when working in the role, which might ultimately lead to you leaving early. And that's their biggest concern, by the way. Now, unfortunately, a lot of candidates fail this test because they don't realise what's actually happening. And that's mistake number one. Some people take this personally and snap back with something like, well, isn't it better to have someone with more experience? And I get why it feels like they're challenging your right to be there. But here's the problem. The second you get defensive, the interviewer is thinking, will this person be difficult to manage? Now you've created tension that wasn't there before. So rule number one, don't get defensive, okay? Then there's mistake number two, the opposite approach, where candidates try to play down their skills to seem like they're a better fit. They'll say things like, oh, my experience isn't really that extensive, or my last role wasn't actually that senior. And this is a big mistake. If you downplay yourself in an interview, will you do the same on the job? Now they're doubting your confidence and credibility. The last thing you want to do is make them wonder if you're being honest about your abilities. Mistake three was also super common. Candidates would feel like they needed to explain why they had applied and would start sharing personal struggles. So they might say things like, I've been looking for a while and I'm happy to be flexible, or I'm okay with it, I just need stability. And listen, I totally understand why someone might say that, but here's the reality. Hiring managers don't make decisions based on personal situations. They hire based on business needs. And if your answer is about your needs instead of how you solve their problems, you're making it harder for them to say yes. Now, this mistake was often linked with mistake number four, over-explaining or rambling. Now, this one happened all the time. People would panic, start over-explaining, give way too many details, and basically dig themselves into a hole. I once had someone give me a 12-minute response without taking a breath. Now, I'm sure they thought that they were fantastic, but instead of reassuring me as the interviewer, all it did was raise more concerns about how overly opinionated and difficult to manage they'd be. Okay, so if you ever catch yourself talking for more than 30 seconds without pausing, you're probably saying too much. So remember, keep it simple, keep it confident, and don't talk yourself out of the job. But also, don't be too vague. If you respond by saying something like, I just want new challenges, Or, yeah, but I'm looking to try something new. This is going to do absolutely nothing for you. The interviewer will just be sitting there thinking, okay, but why this role? Why this company? Ultimately, if your answer is too generic, the interviewer is going to think, so you could literally take any job then. And that's only going to make them question whether you'll stick around. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Aren't you overqualified? Is not really a question about your skills. It's about your commitment. It's about your attitude. And sometimes it's about seeing if you can handle a little pressure. Because if you react poorly to a simple interview question, what happens when real challenges come up on the job? So now that you understand what's really happening, let me show you the right way to respond, because actually this statement or question can be a huge opportunity for you to establish your value. So look, you don't need to defend yourself. You need to redirect the conversation and show them why you're the perfect fit for the role. Now, this question can really be treated in the same way as if they'd said, why do you want to work here? So I'm going to give you a simple 4-step framework to answer this with confidence, turn the question back on them, and actually make them want to sell the job to you. So first things first, and step 1, you want to thank them and turn it into a positive. So instead of getting defensive, say something like, I appreciate the compliment. I really liked the job description and saw an opportunity to make an impact after helping name former employer with similar challenges. Now, what you're doing here is acknowledging their concern without fighting it. You're showing enthusiasm for the role and you're reframing overqualified as a strength. Think about it. If you position yourself as an asset rather than a potential issue, they start seeing it that way too. And let's not forget, they're a busy hiring manager and they invited you for an interview. If they really felt your experience and expectations were too far out of reach, you wouldn't even be there. Now for step 2, you're going to flip the question and establish your value, and here's where we take control of the conversation. So instead of justifying yourself, you turn it around and make them explain why they picked you. So after reinforcing your interest, follow up with something like, hey, I'm sure you've had lots of interest and plenty of great candidates. So I was actually curious, what stood out about my background that made you invite me in ahead of hundreds of others? Now, why is this so powerful? Because it forces them to verbalize what they already like about you. It shifts the dynamic. Now they're listing your strengths and it gets them talking instead of you justifying yourself. And here's what usually happens. They'll tell you exactly why they brought you in. And they might even say something like, well, we saw you had achieved X, Y, and Z with your previous employer, which is exactly what we need. But we just want to be sure you're not going to leave after a few months if something else comes along. And boom, now you know their real reservation. It's not really about being overqualified. It's about job stability. And that leads us to step 3, addressing their concerns with confidence. You see, now that you know their real hesitation, it's time to reassure them. You want to show them that you're not just looking for any job. You're looking for the right fit. So here's an example of how you respond. You'll say something like, I totally get that. As I mentioned, when I saw you were working towards, and then insert a company goal from their website or job description, that really hooked me in. My focus has always been on contributing meaningfully and growing within a company that values, and then mention a key aspect of the role. And this works because it acknowledges their concern without over-explaining. It ties your interest to something deeper than I need a job, and it reassures them that you're thinking long term. Now at this point, you've removed their biggest worry, but we're not done yet. Now we flip the power back to you. So step 4, here's the final move, and it's subtle but so powerful. So before ending your response, you flip the script one last time and get them to agree with you. So say something like, if that's what you feel company name can offer, then I'm all for it. Does that sound fair? And in doing so, it turns the interview into a conversation. It makes them reflect on what they're offering you, and it puts you in a position of confidence, not just hoping they'll pick you. And the best part, they start selling the role to you. Instead of worrying about whether you're overqualified, they're focused on why you'd be a great addition to their team. So let's recap and put it all together. So step 1, acknowledge and reinforce your interest. Thank them and highlight why you're excited about the role. Step 2, flip the question. Ask what stood out about your background that made them invite you in. And then step 3, address their concerns. Reassure them that you're here for the right reasons. And then 4, get a micro agreement from their end, subtly flipping the power dynamic back in your favor. And just like that, you've taken a potential rejection and turned it into an opportunity to sell yourself and make them sell the role to you. So here's what I want you to do. If you've ever been hit with the "you seem overqualified" question, drop a fire emoji in the comments and tell me how you handled it. And if you want more insider interview strategies, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because I drop weekly career hacks to help you land jobs without applying online. I'll see you in the next one.